and welcome to the Tuesday, November 26, 2019 meeting of the Brattleboro Selectboard. There was no executive session, so we are opening the meeting for the first time right now. Has the meeting been properly warned, Peter?
Yes, it has.
Excellent, thank you so much. Do you have comments tonight, Peter?
I don't, thank you.
I also do not have comments. Are there members of the board that have comments or committee reports this evening?
Yeah, a brief report from the workplace, the Diverse Workforce Committee. We have a group of students coming from Franklin Pierce College to visit the town, to visit the school system, the police department, and a bunch of other employers in town. And they'll be spending the whole day in town. This is our second batch of students. It's the second year we've had them, and something we'll continue to do. So I'll keep you updated as the time comes closer.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, David. Other comments or committee reports from the board?
I do not.
Okay. At this time, I will come to the community and ask for public participation. This is your opportunity to speak on something that is not listed on tonight's agenda. Is there anybody here who came for that purpose? Hi there. You can come right up to the microphone and introduce yourself.
Thanks. I'm Derek Jordan, and I live in Dummerston, but I do spend a lot of time in Brattleboro. I am here representing my group, EMF Safety for Vermont, and I wanted to just provide some information for the Select Board that you may not be aware of. So it has recently come to our attention that there is a small cell antenna that has been approved for location in the First Congregational Church in West Brattleboro. It is planned to be hidden inside of the church steeple. And the problem we see with this is that, first of all, there's a mountain of evidence showing biological harm from these antennas. And I'll provide some of that to you tonight so you can look at that. But also, the so-called safe distance that one is supposed to be from these antennas to reduce the exposure is 1,300 feet. The Academy School is located 360 feet from this proposed antenna. And the nursery school is located in the church right underneath it. There's a fire station right nearby, well within the 1,300 feet. So we are very concerned about the exposure to the children from this antenna. And really, I wanted to ask what the current approval process is for these small cell antennas that are going to be going up more and more in Brattleboro. Is that done through the town manager?
No, permits for that are not an issue. We could provide information to the board and to the public about the process that is required.
Okay, that might not be a bad thing.
So I'm just curious then, how are they, is there no approval process? Is that what you're telling me?
That's not what I'm telling you. I'm telling you that, I'll find out what the
Oh,
process is.
out.
I don't know specifically for that item.
Yeah, this is
we have
a
regulations that'll allow some things in some parts of town and not in other parts of town, and so on. So we'll find out what it is related to small cell antennas.
Thank you.
We'll provide that information to the board and make it available on the website.
That'd be great.
Excellent.
This is a Verizon antenna, if that makes your life easier. That's the first thing. Also, the Public Utilities Commission is open to and wants to hear from the towns about this and about these sightings of these antennas, and to know if there's any concern or issues that are raised within the town about that. So they're open to that. That's what I've been told by people who know that. I will provide for you a report that was prepared by one of our members about the installation of this antenna in the church. So you can look over the specs and other information regarding the biological harm. Also, just quickly, you may be aware that the National Toxicology Program has done a bunch of studies on wireless exposure. And there's a recent update to their studies showing brain cancer, heart cancer, DNA damage. And this is from regular 3G exposure. And I'll provide you that as well. Let's see. Oh, this is really interesting. So this is a recent development that happened last week. The Washington, D.C. Federal Court of Appeals issued a reprimand to the FCC about their lack of environmental review for small cell antennas. Up till now, they've had somewhat free rein to just let them go in wherever. But this court decision actually says they need to do an environmental review for the antennas, and I'll provide that information as well. Can I give this to you now?
Please do.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you for those comments. Thank you. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
It looks like they're,
We'll send it to you.
that sounds great. Tim, you want to speak? You want to just say anything?
Yeah, I feel compelled to say something here because I believe very strongly in free speech and these public comment periods to be a great place to speak your mind, no matter what you'd like to say. However, I feel that the anti-5G movement is based on fear, not science. I've looked into this extensively, and I think many people are being misled on this issue. And I want to reassure that this body up here would never approve of something that we felt was of harm to our children. And it really, Derek, I would have stayed quiet on this, but you're mentioning a proximity to schools, and there honestly is zero science, zero reliable science that there's any harm in the new 5G technologies. And this is getting under my skin. So it's a personal statement, but I really don't think that free speech extends to yelling fire in a crowded movie house, and I don't think it extends to driving fear into the hearts of parents around here unnecessarily. So I'll be quiet about that, but you're not going to find a anti-5G advocate in me. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim and Derek. We're not going to go back and forth on this because we can't, because it hasn't been a publicly warned item. Are there other members of the community here tonight that would like to speak on something not on tonight's agenda? Ms. Libby?
I am Anne Elizabeth Howes, also known as Libby, and I was at home for yesterday's introducing the hope and plan for the overflow shelter that has been proposed as a design for the South Main Street neighborhood. And I think there was a number of years ago, there was a house built beyond the baseball diamond on South Main Street that was built by Habitat for Humanity, and it fit into the neighborhood. It's sort of like, you know, good old-fashioned New England architecture. I was thinking that the problem, you know, how to accommodate the homeless population is a little bit sort of larger and looser than they take a big leap forward to, and we've talked about this a little bit before. The Home Depot address has been vacant for 10 years, and it's a very large space, and it could take an accommodation of a new floor, a second floor, that would be wonderful, an ideal, 80 to 120 single room occupancy, managed, like through, the homeless population is at the drop-in center. It's a collective kitchen. People mill in and mill out. There would be, to be able to have an experimental kitchen, counseling, and some sort of, like media center where, at the end of the day and in the course of the day, you're involved with computers and you also like to watch movies. This is what happens at the drop-in center, which is a tiny little box. It's very, very comfortable in the winter, and it's like a heaven. But the idea of accommodating, and Brattleboro has it, accommodating the homeless people, like within driving distance in the course of a day, is a big reputation. I think we should think in terms of accommodating, like having a concierge, a town concierge, to single room occupancy, which we've lost a lot of the housing with the fire in that changed the Main Street building, Brooks House, into CCV. We lost those apartments. We lost the apartments when we built the parking structure. We had a single room occupancy with an old grocery store there. If we were to contemplate, the population comes to Brattleboro, and why? And I think, I came because of a very odd idea. It's like my mother's aunt saved a tree in the Commons Park, and it is that tree that was like an attractive force to coming, the idea of coming home. So there's so many factors with people are coming into the area, and they're just wandering in, and they just want to be the 60s hippie without any problem or conflict. It just being. And I think that it would be a single room occupancy privilege, and at the same time a kind of very special accommodation that we may be able to do inside of a budget of $3 million, that we may be able to do as turning persons into more dynamic contributors, or like cleaning up and becoming professional, be able to cook or construct clothing, or learn and teach media. And so I'm thinking that our problem, though, we feel like a little snug little ship at 60 South Main Street, and it's dreamy with heat in the wintertime, but to take a great leap forward for many people across a lot of time, I think it's time for the town to consider the single room occupancy option, and that the old Home Depot shell is a good shell to begin with.
Thank you,
for your
Ms.
time.
Libby. Thank you. Are there other members of the community that would like to speak on something not listed on tonight's agenda? Okay, and at this time, I'm going to move into our first item, which is regarding local Board of Health. It is a hearing on an emergency health order relating to 48 and 50 Central Street and 6 Reynolds Drive. Peter, would you like to facilitate the beginning of this discussion?
So procedurally, you should convene as the Board of Health, as you often do when you're going to be liquor commissioners or.
Okay, great. I would take a motion to convene as the Board of Health.
I move to convene as public health.
Excellent. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
And now you'll proceed with the hearing. You should hear first from Town Attorney Bob Fisher and our town team that has compiled the information for you tonight, and then hear whether there's any other information that anybody else wishes to present to you.
Thank you for that direction. Bob?
Thank you. And I just want to give the board sort of the procedural history of how we got here tonight, and then turn it over to Health Officer Leonard Howard to tell you about the actual health violations at these properties. But in the middle of last week, an emergency health order was issued and I believe served on the 21st, which was Thursday, upon Mr. Hunter, the owner of 48 and 50 Central Street and 6 Reynolds Drive. That order was also served with procedural rights to appeal that, and pursuant to the statute, within 5 days you have an appeal hearing, and that's where we are tonight. That order, as part of it, had a no occupancy order such that the tenants of these buildings were to be moved out. Mr. Hunter, and that was communicated to the tenants. Provisions were made for the tenants to meet with various organizations to find alternative housing. In the meantime, Mr. Hunter asked for a stay of that emergency order from Superior Court ex parte, meaning it was without notice to the town, and that was granted by the court on Thursday afternoon by Judge Kanan. The judge set a hearing for tomorrow afternoon on that issue of the stay, which the town will be attending. Or at least two of the three of us will be attending that tomorrow, along with witnesses from the State Division of Fire Safety. So with regard, so the court stayed the no occupancy, and the town went back, unlocked essentially the buildings. All the tenants were able to go back to their apartments. And my understanding is some work was done over the course of Friday through the weekend, and the health officer, along with the State Division of Fire Safety, re-inspected the property yesterday. There are still, and I'll let Leonard Howard go into this, still numerous public health violations there, but just so the board and the public knows, the town will not be asking tomorrow for a no occupancy order, but simply a health order that's been proposed, and you have a copy of in your packet, that addresses the public health concerns at these two properties. But that will be done by an order that has these items being cured or brought into compliance within a particular time period. So with that, if there are any questions procedurally, I can take those at this time, but absent any questions, I'll turn it over to Health Officer Howard.
Does the board have questions, or anyone to listen to Health Officer Howard?
I'm content to wait.
I have one question about the ruling, but I can come back to it.
If you think it's pertinent now, you can go ahead.
I was going to ask you, did the judge give any reason to grant that stay?
No, the order is 4 lines long and simply stays the emergency order and sets the hearing for tomorrow afternoon.
Okay. Is that fairly common for that to happen, for a judge to just, without hearing much evidence, to just go ahead and stay an emergency order from a town?
In my experience, it's uncommon. It is not uncommon for judges to hear requests for temporary restraining orders or emergency injunctions, which a stay would fall into that category, without notice to the other party. There is a Rule 65 of the Civil Procedure that allows that to happen. And then when there is an ex parte order issued, the court sets it for a hearing with notice to the other side, and at that time the other side can ask for that order to be undone. In our situation, given the improvements over the weekend, we're not asking for the no occupancy, but we want to proceed with regard to the curing of these public health violations.
Sure. Thank you.
Good evening. I just want to give you some history. Brian and I have been dealing with these two properties for the last 2 or 3 years, and I'll give you the history for 2019. The fire department's been there to 48 and 50 Central Street 9 times. Brian's been there 6 times for a total of 15 visits. In Reynolds Street, the fire department's been there 3 times, and Brian's been there 5 times, for a total of 23 visits to these 2 locations. Central Street has been issued 3 tickets under the ordinance for recycling and trash in 2019, and Reynolds Drive has been issued 1 ticket. What brought us to the emergency health order is these things continue to arise each time we go there for a re-inspection after we've done an inspection. And the biggest concern to the fire department and anybody is life safety. And one of the things that we're always dealing with is missing smoke and carbon monoxide detectors. And that was the big reason for asking the people to not be granted occupancy there, because we keep continuing to have issues with that. However, the other day, yesterday, when the state and I went there, and Brian, we found that the alarms were all in place. And in talking with the state, they felt comfortable that they do have detection, and felt comfortable that they could stay there. Some things that we did find is excessive combustibles in the building. Bob did give you the electrical inspector's report. I mean, I can go through it if you would like, but there's a lot of things on there dealing with GFCI outlets, light fixtures, receptacle boxes that aren't correct or correctly mounted, ceiling fans and exhaust fans that aren't correctly wired and operating properly. On the fire side of it, again, there was excessive combustibles in there. Many extension cords being used because of not having the proper amount of outlets, so they used extension cords, power strips to help with that. A foam board stored in the basement. Exterior stairs, handrails not being properly. Those are the same issues that I have listed in the emergency health order, along with the essential maintenance practice policy that the Vermont Department of Health has for performing these inspections for lead paint for buildings that are pre-1978 or older. This has to be done annually, and it has to be registered with the Vermont Department of Health, which neither of these addresses have been. And the last thing on there is the bed bug infestation that Brian found on September 25th. Yesterday, when we did go there, Brian did another bed bug inspection and did find multiple eggs in one of the apartments on Reynolds Drive. So within a short amount of time, we're going to have bed bug infestation again with all those eggs being there. Those are some of the highlighted things. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them. I'll turn it back over to Bob.
If I could just add too, with regard to the Division of Fire Safety, you have both the fire prevention inspection results and then the electrical inspection results. And with regard to that, there are some items of high hazard listed there. For instance, in the electrical, where there's a heating element cover on the water heater that was not installed and has exposed live metal parts. And the note there is that this exposes anybody to 240 volts if contact is made. So these are not, I mean, there may be some in here that talk about ground fault plugs and things like that, which generally are relatively easy to cure, but there are also some which are extremely dangerous to human life. In addition, you'll see, and in both of these, where there's reference to excessive fuel load in the hallways and especially in the basement. What I was asking Bruce Martin from the Division of Fire Safety what fuel load means. It's essentially a lot of material. It can be furniture, it can be boxes, it's not necessarily a can of gas sitting next to the furnace. But the furnace did have a leak, and as I understand it, they had been self-priming the furnace. And what it is that you have a lot of this material right near areas that can be very prone to fire. And so that's why they want all of that excessive fuel load to be removed. along with having that removed from your hallways, your egresses from these buildings to make it safe. But the Division of Fire Safety, first and foremost, what makes a property safe is having the early detection, such that if there is a fire, if you have working smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors, that's your first warning. So with that, the town is asking the local Board of Health, the Select Board acting as health commissioners, to make the order as presented to you in the proposed order, and that this order be made subject to and will take effect after tomorrow's hearing in court. So I think, I don't know Mr. Hunter, but are you Mr. Hunter in the back? So if Mr. Hunter wishes to address the board, or the board has questions, I don't want to cut it off here, because he certainly has every right to tell his position on this matter.
Is the board open to hearing Mr. Hunter speak at this time?
Yes.
Mr. Hunter, do you wish to speak?
Yes.
Please come to the microphone in the center of the room and introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Will Hunter. A couple of just minor corrections. I did not appeal. I was not aware until Mr. Howard sent me an email yesterday afternoon that this hearing was going to happen. I have not been furnished copies of any of the materials from the inspection that took place yesterday. We had 5 inspectors going through 4 apartments. I would certainly appreciate seeing what is being presented here, and I think it's a little unfair that it's being presented here without being furnished to me. I did go last week, after I had been served by a police officer in Springfield with a copy of Mr. Howard's emergency health order. I went to see Mr. Howard. I asked him if it could be modified so that we could do the remedial work that needed to be done. And I would just say, over the course of the last several years, I've worked, I thought, well with Mr. Bannon and Mr. Howard. We have had multiple inspections. We have had problems with tenants taking down smoke detectors, having to be told that they need to leave them in place. I would thank the couple of members of the fire department who came and did one of the inspections that made it very clear to the tenants that they needed to leave those smoke detectors alone, and if they were removed, they might be held personally responsible. We've had ongoing problems with trash, but by and large, I think we've addressed the problems that have been brought to our attention. If I'm given a copy of the reports from the inspection yesterday, I'll deal with those the way we have in the past and get the things corrected. When I did go to see Mr. Howard a week ago Thursday and asked that some accommodation be made, and he said he wasn't willing to do that, I told him that I was going to talk to the tenants, and then if their position was they wanted to be able to stay in their homes, I would probably go to Newfane and seek a court order to stay the order, which is exactly what I did. Before I did it, I sent him a copy of what I was taking to the court, so it wasn't anything I did behind the town's back. He had a copy of it before I went to the court. As soon as the order was issued, I called the fire department to let them know. They asked me to drive the order down here, which I did, and came and met with Mr. Howard and Mr. Bannon late Thursday afternoon. So I really would like to go back to what I thought was a more cooperative relationship that we had. I don't want to have to be spending time going to court to tell people not to do things the way they've chosen to do them, but it was very important for me that people who have had a history of homelessness not be made homeless again. And I'm glad the court issued the order. I'm very glad to hear that the town is not seeking to order everybody out, and within a reasonable amount of time we'll do what is shown on these reports that need to be done. My understanding for a health order usually that issues, a proposed health order is furnished to the respondent so that there can be a dialogue. So I don't know what kind of timeframes are being put in the health order that you're being asked to approve tonight, but I haven't seen it, and I haven't seen those reports. So that's just a procedural concern I've got that makes it a little difficult to respond beyond that. But thank you for the chance to explain my side of what's happened.
Thanks, Mr. Hunter. Jan, do you have any copies that are useful to
Yes,
Mr. Hunter?
Yes, I do.
Mr. Hunter, if you would approach the table to the side here, Jan will furnish you with things that I think you'll find useful.
This is a copy of the packet with the proposed order, and then these are the reports. Okay, you're welcome.
With regard to, and I'm glad Mr. Hunter has copies of these, but the Division of Fire Safety provides these at the building, I think, and then sends it to them. So these documents from the Division of Fire Safety don't come from the town usually to the property owner. They come directly from the state office. So I am assuming either they were being sent or they were dropped off at the property. I don't know if he has a property manager there, but I don't know why Mr. Hunter doesn't have copies of this before right now. I'm glad that he does, okay?
This one has to do with microphone, please.
Oh, yeah, go to the microphone, please, Mr. Hunter.
This one has to do with a building owned by Gordon and Judith Whistle.
That's the prior owner. The state had them still listed as the building owner. So.
Okay, so that's,
Still you.
Okay.
That's 4850 Central
all right,
Street.
this is the electrical inspection.
And then the other is the
Okay,
fire
all right,
inspection.
yep.
Yeah. And so I just wanted to clarify that. And with regard to the issue of this not being an appeal, when an emergency health order is issued, the statute provides that the person to whom it's issued shall be provided the opportunity for a hearing within the 5 days. That's why we have this. If we were proceeding for a health order not on an emergency basis, then it's started through a notice of intent to seek a health order. That then gets sent to the respondent and set by the board for a hearing. In either case, we end up right before the board as we are tonight, sitting before the select board, sitting as the local health commissioners. Interestingly enough, the appeal process, however, goes from this board to the State Board of Health, not to court. Ultimately, it goes to the Supreme Court, but so this has taken a bit of a zigzag by virtue of the request for the stay. And we have to respond to that, and that's why we're going to court tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you, Bob. Will, Mr. Hunter? Yeah, please come to the microphone. Thank you. That way people who are watching can hear.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I'm still, maybe I'm missing it here in the packet, but I still don't see the order that you're asking this board to adopt. Unless it's just the emergency health.
No, you can have my copy.
It's page 4 of the memo, I think.
Oh, okay, well,
Is that correct? It's been updated.
It's been updated today based on yesterday's
Thank you. Okay.
inspection. There were certain things from last Thursday, Friday that have been corrected, which is very good.
Correct.
So that proposed order was modified today, and Mr. Hunter has the most
I don't think it's in the,
Peter has it if you'd like to approach the select board's table. Right here. Oh, Patrick has it. Okay. Thank you, Patrick.
Oh, that's fine. You can keep it. Okay, thank you.
While Mr. Hunter is reviewing that, is there anybody here tonight who is wanting to speak on this issue? Thank you.
Ryan Kendrick, representing Groundworks, and wanting to check on some of the issues that directly affect the tenants. One is what happens to the health order if things don't come into compliance? Is there a next step process in terms of then does it become an emergency health order again? I'm really concerned about the tenant's experience in this process, and concerned that if we're talking about 2 to 3 years of repairs not being made, that tenants will continue to be impacted.
If I may.
Please do.
With regard to that, the enforcement of a health order, so if the items that the owner would be directed to cure are not done, then the next step would be for the town to seek court enforcement or injunction to enforce those. That could entail a no occupancy order if those violations that remain still in violation rise to the level of a public health hazard for the tenants. So it doesn't necessarily, it depends on how much is brought into compliance and how quickly, and if there are, I'm sure, just knowing the Division of Fire Safety, if there are a couple real minor ones, they might say, all right, if that's not done by this date, we'll give you a little bit of an extension. They tend to work with the owners with regard to that.
Sure.
But if it's not brought into compliance, then it is possible for the town to, again, seek the no occupancy.
Is there an understanding of what tips it back into no occupancy? Because it certainly doesn't sound like anything that's being discussed tonight is safe occupancy for the tenants that are living there.
You certainly have, I mean, it's a matter of degree, but you have the infestation of bed bugs,
Right.
and you have the fire hazards with the excessive fuel load in these areas. But if you had the excessive fuel load combined with no smoke detectors, that was the precipitating factor for having the no occupancy, because you have no detection and you have the risk of the fire.
So
So with one of those being cured in the meantime is why the town was saying we're not currently asking for the no occupancy. And correct me if I'm
Correct.
misstating that in any way
No,
from the fire
that's
perspective.
correct.
I appreciate that. I'm just concerned about the back and forth for tenants. If there is a no occupancy order, then tenants are able to access emergency motel nights through the state. Those have limits on them, and so tenants were excited to move back, because otherwise, if they were then asked to move back out tomorrow, which is what their understanding was, then they would have less access to that program. So in terms of, I appreciate that Mr. Hunter takes tenants that may have challenging histories, but housing folks that are previously homeless in substandard housing is actually not a benefit to them. So I'm really concerned about what happens next for the tenants. Thanks.
Thank you, Mariana. What is the, without me digging through, what is the expected timeline for this to be cured?
For all of these items listed A through I on the last 2 pages of the proposed order, it's 7 days. And that's based on what Bruce Martin from the Division of Fire Safety, on a phone call we had with him yesterday, was recommending for the timeline for compliance.
It should be made pretty clear that I personally feel, and I would think that this board might not feel much differently, that there's not going to be leeway or compromise on that time frame. And so I think I would like to know what you're thinking about your ability to cure these items, Mr. Hunter, within 7 days, because I agree with Ms. Kendrick that do not want a back and forth or any kind of lack of consistency for the tenants. And so I believe that giving compromise on timelines provides too much opportunity for the tenants to not know what their next step is and whether or not they're going to be, how long they're going to feel like they're going to be staying in their apartment.
Well, as I said, I'm being furnished this now for the first time. We're about to move into a period of time when there's a holiday. Okay, I'm
seriously, you did not just say that.
What?
This is people's safety. This work gets done, whether it's a holiday or not. And I understand that you may have just gotten this But considering your involvement with the town, there's no way that you thought it was going to be much different than what is in your hand. Is that right, Mr. Hunter?
I don't understand your question.
My question is,
I was present at the inspection. I asked earlier in the day whether I was going to get copies of the inspection reports. The explanation apparently is that my copy might have been dropped off at the property, but a copy got sent to the town. I'm just trying to read this at the same time, and if your position is that 7 days is going to be the deadline, then we'll make sure that it gets done in 7 days. Good. But it's a little hard to do this on the fly when I'm reading this for the first time, and I don't know what is in here that may be impossible to schedule somebody to do within 7 days.
please.
It would be easier to feel some compassion for your circumstance if we didn't have nearly 40 violations. We had 12 in 2017, 17 in 2018, 14 already this year. We got a month to go. And so, I mean, I don't see, well, whenever we're ready for the motion, I'm happy to approve it.
I just want to clarify a couple of things. So through the health officer, there have been numerous contacts made to talk about, well, to discover what the issues are and to provide information about that, correct?
Right.
So during the course of this process where we've learned that this housing is unsafe and unhealthy, there have been information about missing smoke alarms and other issues that affect the health and safety of the tenants.
Right.
Okay. So this is not the first time, perhaps, that you're hearing these things.
No, I've participated numerous times with inspections, with follow-up inspections, and understand that that's my obligation. I have no problem with that. What I'm responding to is I'm looking at the proposed order, which says within 7 days, all the things that are on some other reports, which I'm reading for the first time, and maybe they're all doable within 7 days, but I'm, as I say, trying to read it on the fly and participate in this conversation.
Yeah, no, I understand that. That is challenging for sure. And I think that none of this information should come as a surprise given previous inspections. So whilst I understand that it is challenging to read this and also be asked to respond to it, I think that none of this is new.
No. The only thing that's new on here from yesterday is having an electrical inspector going through and doing a more thorough electrical inspection, and with us finding the leaking oil burner yesterday. Mm-hmm. Those are the new things. All these other items are things that we find each time we go in there, so they're really nothing new to Will's surprise here, other than those.
The leak is in the oil tank or in the?
It's on the burner itself, which was stopped, but these burners need to be inspected by a certified technician to make sure they operate properly.
Yeah. Okay.
You're talking about the bleed valve that needed to be tightened?
Correct.
Okay, which we tightened.
May I add something into the record? So the details are set forth in the paperwork, and if you need to probe that any further, then certainly Len and Brian can provide additional details about what they have seen in these frequent visits to the site. But I just think the characterization that this has been a collaborative process needs to be corrected for the record, because it's a very serious matter for us to be here to have a hearing over a health order. It's so rare that it's the first time that we've actually conducted one of these during my 5 years with the town.
And my 7. And never before.
And so we only get to this stage of this process when processes, the communication up until now hasn't led to a solution. So it is true that there's been a tremendous amount of communication between the town and Mr. Hunter, but the process of addressing the deficiencies at these two sites has not been collaborative. And that's why this is being held as a health order hearing, rather than being something that goes on with, a notice and some corrections and some, oh, you got to get a few more things done, and then a few more things get done, and then a property's in compliance. That's how it works when it's working well.
And in fact, the statute
not what happened.
provides for what's called an assurance of discontinuance when there are these health violations ordinarily, and that's why you're not here on a routine basis as we are tonight, because most times the landowner will sign an assurance of discontinuance to cure things within a time frame set either by the health officer or by the state.
Does anybody?
Need a motion? Oh,
I'm sorry.
I just need to, some of these things you're gonna have to bring an electrician's gonna have to be called, is that correct?
That's correct.
Whoever inspects furnaces person is gonna have to be called. Yeah, I still want it done, I mean, it has to be done in 7 days, it has to be. I don't see how else people can go on living in circumstances like this. It's getting cold out, we're talking about window issues and furnace issues and electrical extension cords running all over the place. I mean, does anybody on this board feel that 7 days is not fair?
No, I'd like to also point out that it's not just the health and safety of the tenants, but it's the health and safety of the neighborhood.
Absolutely. Especially during the dry time of year. So I'm ready to move.
Yeah, before it gets too deep.
Yeah, I just had a question out of curiosity, but it
No,
really...
I think you should ask it. So.
My curiosity is, I drove by today Central Avenue, and there was a truck, it looked like filled with bags of something. Is that the same truck that was there over 2 years ago?
Full of garbage?
No,
Is it a new truck?
that's been there for maybe a month or 2
Okay.
months,
So it's in-
full of garbage.
Are there further comments from members of the community? Otherwise, this board is prepared to make motions this time. Okay, I would entertain a motion.
I move that we approve the emergency health order as presented.
Just to modify that just slightly, so what you'd be approving is a health order without the word emergency attached to it, because Lenny issues emergency orders and you issue regular orders.
The hearing says hearing on emergency health order. That's what the agenda.
That's a good point. So, but then if you concur with what's been presented to you, what you would actually be issuing is a health order.
So, Jen, would you change that to, I move we accept the health
So
order?
that's a friendly
as
amendment
presented?
that's been accepted?
Thank you.
Yes.
Friendly amendment.
Friendly.
Such
Okay.
that, you know.
David has made that motion. All those in favor? Aye. Close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Hope to see everything brought up to compliance. Thank you for your work, and hopefully everything is done in 7 days as directed. I don't know what my agenda is anymore.
Do you want to adjourn as health commissioners?
At this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn as health commissioners.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Excellent. We will now move on to our next agenda item, which is our first item under new business, possible reconsideration of a motion to opt out of the National Prescription Opiate Litigation Class Action Suit and rescind exclusion request form. Got that, Chris? Okay, Peter,
It's being videoed, so he's.
do you want to open this up, or do you want to kick it right over to Attorney Fisher?
Straight to Bob, please.
All right,
So
Bob.
last week, the board, in one of its motions, moved to opt out of the national class litigation, and the deadline for opting out was last Friday. And it was the situation where if you don't opt out, you're automatically in that national class. That is a national class action against the opioid manufacturers, distributors, etc. The board decided and moved to opt out The day after, we completed the opt-out form that is prescribed as part of that litigation, and we submitted that. I then let our special counsel in Brattleboro suit against the opioid manufacturers, distributors, pharmacies, etc., know that. And she expressed concern that that would actually be detrimental to the town's leverage, both in its suit and potential, if it did enter the national suit, to gain recovery sooner. I informed Attorney Sakala that we had already sent that in, and she explained that there is a way to rescind the opt-out if the board wished to do so. And based on that, we thought it made sense to come back to the board to potentially reconsider its decision last week to opt out of that decision. As far as the ability to rescind the opt-out, that has been done before. In fact, it was explained to me that in New York State there were many counties where the Attorney General had recommended the opt-out option, but in learning more about the suit as it progressed and how it would be structured, the Attorney General reversed that decision, and the towns that had filed the opt-out form were able to rescind that and remain in that class. So if the board tonight wishes to reconsider its decision to opt out, then the ability to rescind should put you back into that opt-in class for that national class litigation. So I asked Attorney Sakala to explain why she was concerned and what what are the advantages of the town remaining both in that national class and having the separate suit along with the town of Bennington and other Vermont municipalities against these defendants. One of the main reasons had to do with the timing of the suits, and it was her opinion that if the town opts out, that the town's leverage to get into negotiations early or to go to court early, to get discovery, depositions, all of those sorts of things before the national class would be compromised, and so you would have your separate suit sitting sort of at the back of the line. So she didn't think that that was advantageous to the town. In the national class, it was also explained to me by her that there is a lot of shared discovery in terms of the facts that will be discovered, some of which are already discoverable, that the town, if it opted out, would not have access to. So there was another reason. But in large part, if I had to summarize her concerns, it was that the town was losing leverage by not being in that national class. And so I asked her to give us some bullet points, which I believe she just sent this afternoon, but I think the board has, that outlines the advantages of opting in to that national class litigation. So I apologize that this is a bit sloppy to, as far as making one decision 1 week and being asked to reconsider it so soon. But when our special counsel is raising this with the concerns that she did, I think it's important to at least bring back to the board for your reconsideration. I am not an expert with national class actions on opioid litigation. Been trying to read up on this. I understand from the concept of how a case progresses her concerns, and it is my advice to the board to follow your special counsel's advice in terms of rescinding your opt-out and therefore being in that national class.
Thank you, Bob. members of the board that would like to speak at this time?
Just pretty much we've been following the advice of attorneys through this whole process, and it seems like it wouldn't necessarily be wise to stop doing that now. So we can move quickly with this one.
Well, when it comes down to it, I agree with David. It does make me feel like a little bit of a backing away from the other case, in my opinion, which doesn't make me feel as good about all the work we did together, deliberating and talking about pharmacies and such. But I tend to agree overall with following her advice.
I can address that partially, Tim, with regard to it's not backing away from the separate suit that Brattleboro, joining with Bennington, is making, because it is still unclear which of the defendants that are named in the Brattleboro suit are going to agree to the methodology of the settlement in the national class. It could be that all of those defendants join in that, but some of them are most likely not going to. So you just can't get double recovery, but there may be defendants that national class doesn't cover, and in that way you're actually more covered than towns that just do the national class, because you've got a separate suit that actually is naming this large group of defendants in that case. So I see your point, but I hope that makes you feel a little bit better.
It does. It does, just a little bit. Thank you.
Peter?
Just a quick clarification, because we've now moved into talking about the two separate suits, I think it's important to just note for the public's benefit that the reconsideration this evening is only about whether or not to be in the national class action suit, and would not be any reconsideration of those thorough deliberations you had and the decisions that you made regarding the town's independent suit.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you for that.
Well-
No, listen.
We're hedging our bets. Let's go.
Are there members of the community that would like to speak on this?
Thankfully.
Okay, then if there's no further discussion, I would entertain a motion. Whatever motions we need.
You would want to have a motion to rescind your action to opt out of the national class action suit, and in so doing would opt back in to that
That's
class.
correct.
Does anybody want to tackle that?
I think we
Crafting
could
that
accept a
motion?
so moved on that, but
So-
Jan,
Could we?
could you accept a so moved?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Oh, great.
Go ahead.
No, I already so moved something. You go.
You already so moved it?
Yeah.
Okay, so moved.
Liz has made that motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion
All right, very
carries.
good.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thank you. Someday you will be
The
able to
area
stop
of
talking
litigation could arrest.
Yeah.
sometime.
Yeah, really.
At this time, we will move into our second item of new business, which is a request to VTrans to lower the speed limit on Route 9.
I'm happy to present to you an item that is less complicated and I think an easier lift. There have been concerns about a variety of different safety concerns about traffic on Route 9. That led to a meeting in October up in Marlboro that involved several different municipalities and some legislators and the leadership of VTrans. The secretary of the agency was there along with several other senior members of that staff. And there was a good thorough discussion about these different aspects of safety concerns. But the one that is pertinent to tonight's conversation is speed, particularly speed as people come off of the highway portion, such as it is. It's very rural highway through the woods and lots of turns and so on that lead to some of the other safety concerns. But nevertheless, you're traveling a highway between Wilmington and Brattleboro through Marlboro, and then arrive into the West Brattleboro corridor traveling and allowed to travel at a 40-mile-per-hour speed. And so the West Brattleboro Association has made a request to the town, and the reason they made this request to the town is that under the state's rules, only a municipality can ask the state to reduce a speed limit on a state highway. So individual organizations or individual citizens can't. Recognizing that, the West Brattleboro Association asked the town to request of VTrans a reduction from Paradise Farm out slightly west of the curve that sort of leaves West Brattleboro proper, or the developed area of West Brattleboro, and heads out towards Marlboro, out beyond Chelsea Royal, from Paradise Farm to Edward Heights. And the reason for Edward Heights in particular there is that is the intersection where the state highway becomes the town's jurisdiction on Western Avenue, where Marlboro Road ends and Western Avenue begins. The request is to reduce the speed limit from 40 miles per hour to 30 miles per hour. This was considered at the Traffic Safety Committee meeting in October, and the Traffic Safety Committee unanimously recommended this with a couple of additional provisions. We believe that both the town staff and the members of the Traffic Safety Committee believe that it would go hand in hand with such a reduction in speed limit and be a significant additional benefit to the area if bike lanes were added in both directions, one bike lane on each side of Route 9 as it comes through that section of West Brattleboro, and that at appropriate locations, crosswalks be added. At a 40-mile-per-hour speed limit, crosswalks are not allowed under the regulations that relate to highway safety, but at a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit, they would be allowed as long as they meet other specifications in terms of what the traffic engineers determine is proper sight lines and so on in terms of safe locations for crosswalks. We think that these two additional factors are important because they lend themselves to the reduction of the speed limit. Without that, the analysis might not, would not be as likely to yield the result that we're seeking. But in addition to that, there is documented evidence of a significant increase in bicycle usage of this corridor, not just for recreational purposes, but from people who are actually using it to commute to work, people who are using it to run errands and do other sort of practical uses as an alternative to using a vehicle. And there's also currently and historically been a lot of pedestrians in this area. It is the largest concentration of low and moderate income housing in Brattleboro, and one of the largest concentrations in the state of Vermont because of the Mountain Home Trailer Park and the Westgate development, as well as other properties along through this corridor. And so it's very important that we seize this opportunity as we make this ask on the speed limit to see if we can also increase the or improve the pedestrian facilities there. Right now what we have is people dashing across Route 9 to go from residences to businesses in various locations along this corridor. I've had communication with the folks at VTrans who will receive this request and process it through the state's traffic committee, and they've been receptive to this. Obviously, they're not able to make a commitment that it would result in one decision or another, but they agree that the timing is opportune because the state is right now in the process of planning the major upgrade to the entire stretch of Route 9 from Edward Heights to Wilmington that's going to be implemented in 2021. So they're doing the design work around that right now, and there is time, while they're well along in that design, there is still time, if this were to be approved, for the pieces that we've recommended to be incorporated into the plan for that project, which is construction of which is only 2 years away.
Great.
So with all of that, and the memorandum that's before you this evening also includes some documentation of various plans that have been approved in the past that suggest these kinds of improvements. They haven't been implemented to a great degree because of the fact that there hasn't been a project there to improve the roadway. So that's why we think that there's a real opportunity here right now.
So you think the timing is within the next 2 years or more sooner than that?
So we'd like you to act on this tonight so we can push aggressively for these changes to be made in the planning for that project. The schedule right now for construction of the project is 2021. So during the warm weather months of 2021, it'll be a little less than 2 years away.
Thank you.
Can I ask a clarifying question as well? So the immediate action would be that we would reduce the speed limit there. How?
So I'm going to
See from your
speculate.
face, maybe not so much.
What's that?
Go ahead.
I'll speculate that the state is unlikely to grant our request to reduce from 40 to 30 without the other changes in the design of this
Oh,
roadway.
okay.
Just based on the width of it and the long sight lines that are there. So it's possible that the speed limit might be reduced and then the other things would come along. I think it's much more likely if we do prevail, and I think we should be optimistic that this is really possible. And if we do prevail, I think it would be for all three of these things to happen and for them to happen simultaneously as part of that 2021 project.
Okay.
Is this an example of something that's Dillon's rule, and if we weren't a Dillon's rule state, we could just do this?
Yes and no. The fact that this particular segment of roadway is state highway makes it less of a
But if it were a
Dillon's
town-
rule aggravation. Further in on Route 9, in the Western Avenue portion that is the town's jurisdiction, we have a variety of similar issues that we face that are in fact
Up to us to remedy?
with which we are burdened explicitly because of Dillon's rule.
Right.
We don't have the flexibility to manage the eastern part of Route 9 as it comes through Western Avenue in the manner that we might choose to without state oversight.
Okay.
Thank you.
I was just going to suggest, it doesn't have to be in the motion, but just to remind everybody that in the at least verbal discussions we've had about Putney Road and Hannaford intersection moving forward soon, hopefully, that the greening of bicycle lanes had been mentioned and favorably looked upon by at least one person in the state, right?
Yes.
I think. Favorably looked upon.
And it's actually been, that's a design that has been used by the state in certain locations, particularly not unlike this one where there's a variety of different uses. So people walking, lots of congestion related to the vehicles that are traveling through the area, lots of commercial entrances and exits, off of the roadway.
Yeah.
So it just makes the bike lane stand out more clearly in that kind of a complicated roadway.
So I just wanted to suggest that moving forward, we
Sure.
just start to always suggest that it's going to be the green standard that people are used to seeing.
Right. I would like to put my 2 cents for it being always protected as well. I know that having protected bike lanes makes it a challenge when we move to the winter time.
Right.
Having cycled on that road, I used to work at Westgate,
Right.
and I used to cycle from downtown to Westgate. You get a lot of tractor trailers and a lot of vehicles. Vehicles are coming down Route 9, going at a feral clip. I'd love to see if we've done any study on the average speed that folks are traveling on that stretch of road, sort of by Chelsea Royal as you come off the hill.
There is some historical speed data.
Yeah.
I don't have any of that at hand.
It's 45 plus is what
I would imagine.
We actually have some
what
data
they
on
find
that.
with the rubber, with the little hoses, is that
Yeah.
the average speed is 45 or more.
Yeah.
But that's,
Yeah, so green paint and all that, great. Protected from traffic, also great. Just want to
I'd like to suggest that we sort of add those on as things we'd like to see as part of this,
Yes.
but that the formal request be as it's written up, so that if we at least get the bike lanes, even if we don't get the green and they aren't
Right.
separated for the roadway, at least they would be identified as bike lanes within this corridor. I think that would be a step in the right direction.
I agree.
Not asking for too much, so that we get it passed.
Informally, we'll add the desire to have them be
well, and the other thing is
painted and
to
separated.
lobby. The other thing would be just to lobby in general for protected bike lanes everywhere that it's physically possible to build them and just
Right.
do it that way. It really is a huge difference.
It does. There's something I feel compelled to say that's kind of spoiling the party.
It's okay.
But the green is great because it makes the bike lane pop. Separated is even better. We are constrained in Vermont in general with, routes that have been in their same basic configuration for a few hundred years, and where it's often not enough room to do a complete street design in the way you ideally would. Mm-hmm. And the additional maintenance that does come along with separated bike lanes and additional colored paint in those corridors is something that if our firm stand is that should be the case, the standard, every place where there is a bike lane, there's a lot of bike lanes on town roads and state roads within the town that are within the town's jurisdiction, where we need to be true to that ourselves, and there'd be a not insignificant additional cost to that. So you're absolutely right in the desire to have that. It does become a complicated equation for us in terms of having an expectation perhaps of the state that we might be reluctant to impose on ourselves. Or the alternative, having to go deeper into our pockets in order to impose it on ourselves, which would be a policy decision.
It may become more obvious over time as people drive less. We don't have to spend so much to repair the roads, and it would make sense to do that, but not today.
Looks like there's a recommended motion at the top of this memo.
I'll make a motion to authorize the town manager to write a letter to the Vermont Agency of Transportation requesting that the section of Route 9 between Edward Heights and Paradise Farm in West Brattleboro be modified to reduce the speed limit to 30 miles per hour, to add bike lanes in both directions, and to add crosswalks at appropriate locations.
Excellent. Tim has made that motion. All those in favor? Aye. Motion carries. All right, we now move into item C, which is a budget item, and we are looking at, in our FY21 proposed budget, both the police department and the fire department's proposed budgets this evening, and we'll be beginning with the police department.
And as Chief Fitzgerald comes to the table, I'll just remind the public, as we do each week, that you can follow along on the budget by going to the town's website at brattleboro.org, clicking on the right-hand side of the homepage on the FY21 proposed budget, and then within the page that takes you to this evening, you'd want to click on, again, the FY21 proposed budget. That'll take you to an approximately 20-page long line item budget that covers all the different aspects of town operations in the general fund. And we'll begin tonight's review with the police department budget at the bottom of page 12 of that line item budget.
And you should flip the PDF with the little turny arrow button, because when I loaded it up, it's like that way. And you need to flip it so that you don't have to turn your computer.
Thank you.
Was it upside down?
Did you say 12?
Sideways.
Oh,
Yeah, it's fine.
or turn your computer.
Yeah, you can do either.
And then you hit the don't rotate button.
Yeah.
Yeah, they do that.
Complicated.
If you want to read straight up and down.
Okay.
Can I, before we get started, can I say something that I neglected to say last week? I just need to say this. A lot of people saw what happened on Putney Road a couple weeks back. I've been so busy that I haven't been able to really write a proper letter to, I think you were away, but the captain was in charge at that point. The actions of our officers in that confrontation that we all saw were just, I thought, outstanding, and goes to show the excellence of their training, and I just wanted to commend them. I don't know who they are, but I would hope you could pass that along with me.
I will, and I was going to talk a little bit about that.
Oh, good.
As we weave into it, but I really appreciate you bringing that up, and just so the public knows, the officers were Lieutenant Warner and Officer Cluck, and they did an outstanding job.
I didn't mean to steal but I didn't want to let it go unrecognized either. So
I appreciate that.
It hasn't been lost on me how differently that could have looked in a town or a city that has a different police department.
I agree.
Pretty heavy how that could have gone in a different place. So I echo Tim's words as well. Okay, on that note.
Okay, what I would like to do is first of all, thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about the department. And what I would like to do, if it's okay with the board, is just basically give a general overview of the department, how the department is made up, how we basically staff our shifts and respond to issues within the town, and then go over and talk about how the budget integrates into our mission statement and philosophy, and then end with what we look forward to every year when we set the goals for the department, and how we strive for those goals. So the Brattleboro Police Department has a staffing of 41 total employees. We have 27 sworn officers authorized. That is made up of 2 at the command element, which would be Captain Kerrigan and myself. We have 4 detective positions with 1 opening. We have 21 sworn officers with 2 openings, 1 office manager, 2 clerks, 8 full-time dispatchers, and 2 part-time dispatchers with both of those openings there. We have 2 openings for part-time dispatchers. So total in all, we have 3 openings for police officer and 2 openings for a part-time dispatcher. A background check is currently being conducted on an applicant for the February 2020 Vermont Police Academy class. And if that background check is successful, that will leave us with just 2 openings going into the next year. 2 officers recently graduated in November and are now attending the post-basic school. They should return back to the police department in mid-December, where they will undergo a 12-week FTO program. Hopefully, if all goes well, they'll be assigned a shift in mid-March of 2020. The hiring process for the Brattleboro Police Department is about a 10-month process from start to finish. The Vermont Police Academy holds 2 classes per year, and those are in February and August, and seating assignments are a first come, first serve. So it's very competitive. From Brattleboro to Burlington, all law enforcement agencies within the states go through the Vermont Police Academy. Game wardens, sheriffs, deputies, Department of Liquor Control, DMV, state police, municipalities, every law enforcement agency goes through there. They have a max capacity of about 40 to 45 students per class. So you're looking at less than 100 police officers per year that are graduated out of the Vermont Police Academy. Very, very competitive process. One of the biggest obstacles that we currently have, and we're not alone, every department in the state experiences this, is that when we get an applicant, we have to keep them actively engaged for a very long time without being actively employed. So if you have an individual who is not a resident of Brattleboro, they apply, we like it, it's a good match, and I do the interviews for the August Academy because it's so competitive. I will be doing the interviews for the August Academy here in December and January, because the seats open up February, the first day of the Academy in February, the seats for August open up. So I want to have in my hand a complete packet of an individual that I can submit that first day. So we will start our process around December, January. Now I have to keep this individual actively engaged for the next 8 months before they can go to the police academy. They're under no obligation to come to us at this point, so they can still apply to different police departments. They can get in trouble and do foolish things and have them drop out because of their poor decision making. Just a lot can happen in 8 months. And we do a really good job of keeping them engaged, inviting them down to do ride-alongs and things of that nature. But that's probably my biggest obstacle and challenge when we're trying to replace these numbers. Last year, we were down 5 officers, and now we're down 2. So we are making considerable headway towards that goal of being fully staffed. Once you are a member, officers work a 10-hour rotating shift with a minimum of 3 officers on duty at all times. This creates an overlap between shifts and it allows officers to be pulled from the road to complete paperwork and for supervisors to direct patrols in the specific areas that are in need of extra enforcement or high visibility police presence. The department owns 12 automobiles, 9 are cruisers, 1 is a major crimes vehicle, 1 is an incident command vehicle, and 1 is the animal control vehicle. 1 cruiser and the major crime vehicle are scheduled to be replaced this year. A little bit about our budget. We have 3 main grants that we consistently apply for year after year. The first one is the CAC, the Children's Advocacy Center grant, and that is for $60,000 that we get annually. We use that to train our detectives in dealing with and investigating and interviewing children that are victims of crimes. And it's a very specialized certification, and we get $60,000 from the CAC, and we have a detective that goes down there and pretty much deals with any crime dealing with a child, sexual assault, sexual abuse, things of that nature. So we rely on that for training, and they reimburse us for the hours that they spend down at the CAC. The Governor of Highway Safety, currently this year the state started a new way of administering that, and it's county-wise or regional instead of each individual PD. They wanted to cut down on the administrative costs and paperwork and things of that nature. So we have teamed up with various law enforcement agencies of Windham County. We get about $15,000 from that, and that helps us greatly. And when we attend a traffic safety meeting or we get complaints from the public about motor vehicle enforcement in certain areas, we can post that, and officers can sign up and go out there and do motor vehicle enforcement, and we can use this grant money instead of our overtime money. So that's a great help. And then we have the Justice Assistance Grant, which is, this year it's currently $12,300. That money is used for, we use that for a lot of downtown patrols, walking downtown. If we were going to do any type of work regarding overtime to illicit drug activity, that comes under that. Equipment for the special operations team will come under that. And personally, what I have used the last 5 years of that is I buy a lot of computer out of that line instead of my budget. I try to do as much as we can with computers. And the reason we do that is because of the cost of the replacement of the computers, the printers. We're a 24/7 operation, and we can go through some electronics fast. On the operation side of the budget, there's a few things I would like to highlight that you might have some questions about. Under my equipment line item, there was a $7,000 increase. And basically what that increase is for is I would like to start a program to have officers downtown on e-bikes, electric assisted bikes. And that is what we're going to need for 2 bikes with all the upfitting and associated equipment for that. In the past, probably, I want to say maybe 7 years ago, we did have a bike team downtown, and it wasn't as productive as I liked it to be perfectly honest with you. We had a lot of shortages in our staff, and what they had to do was put a bike rack on the back of a cruiser because we only had the minimum 3 that were working. So if there was a call at the south end of town or the west end of town or the north end of town, they had to bike back to the cruiser, put the bike on the cruiser, secure it, jump in the cruiser, and then go on the call. We could only have done it when we had an overlap with additional personnel that were bike qualified. I think with the e-bikes now, we can, and they were pretty much contained to where they could ride a bike downtown, you know. With an e-bike, I can expand that range. We won't need a cruiser because they'll be able to zip right up South Main Street Hill and go to the high school if they were in the Harmony parking lot. So I really would like to expand that program. It will increase our presence downtown. We do have officers that are bike qualified at this time. So that's the increase for the my equipment line item. The conference and memberships line item is a $1,500 increase. On that is for dues to various organizations have increased, with the largest increase being to the Vermont Chiefs of Police Association. Membership to these various organizations is vital for professional best practices, updates on legislative changes, representation up in Montpelier, and we get additional discounts on trainings that they offer. In my equipment maintenance line is a $3,000 increase. With additional to the body-worn cameras, we need additional storage because by law we have to archive all that video. Not especially, but when we are dealing with criminal, that's considered evidence. So by law, we have to archive it. And we've only had it for 1 year. We got the storage. We're rapidly creeping up on our current storage. Where we're going to start seeing a benefit from this is once we start reaching the limitations and we can start deleting some of this stuff. And it's all depending on the crime. Some are 3 years, some are 5 years, 7 years, 50 years, some are indefinite. So, but as we start reaching these thresholds, we can start deleting a lot of the video. But theoretically, right now, pretty much every arrest, what we're doing, we're in a position where we have to save it and archive it. So I'm going to need additional 2 terabytes of storage for the body-worn cameras. The automotive maintenance line was a $2,000 increase, and we get the extended warranties on our cruisers now, but what we are finding is we're becoming more and more reliant on the electric components of cruisers, and those are very expensive to fix. And the longer a cruiser sits deadline, we have to, what we call hot rack other cruisers that were supposed to rest, and now they're being run 16, 24 hours a day, and it just snowballs. So we asked for an increase on that. So when a vehicle does go down, we can immediately get it in, get it out, and get it back on the road. And that's because of the high increased cost of the electronic components. I'd like to talk real briefly about some of the community organizations that we habitually work with on a daily basis. We're constantly in the schools. We do all sorts of activities with them, from reading, eating lunch, playing at recess, giving classes, and just basically hanging out. So we do a lot of work with the schools. The reception from the principals have been overwhelming and more than welcoming. So we really appreciate that. Of course, Project Care, and we'll talk a little bit more in depth on that. Groundworks, the Citizens Police Communications Committee, the Community Equity Collaborative, Frontline, which deals with domestic violence, Turning Point, the Brattleboro Area Prevention Coalition, the Big Brothers Big Sisters program, United Way, and of course we do Coffee with a Cop once a quarter. So we work with a lot of great organizations within the town and have a very strong relationship with them. The focus of this year has been mainly in the quality of life issues that have challenged our community. The most prevalent have been the opiate crisis and the homelessness. This past summer, we have worked tirelessly with various organizations to include town government in addressing the trespass challenges. With treating people with respect and dignity as our guide, I believe we have established a very fair and robust procedure now in dealing with trespassing or staying on public property. The opiate issue, to this day, we've had 64 arrests with dealing with opiates, and that already surpasses the arrests for 2018. Search warrants, non-consensual, we have executed 10 of those with 12 people being arrested as a result of the evidence found. We're right on par with 2018 in that aspect. As a matter of fact, we have arrested more people off the warrants than 2018, but we haven't written as many warrants. And we still got a little over a month to go to get the final numbers. This does not include joint operations. This is just the Brattleboro Police Department, not when we're working with conjunction agencies. Some of the other agencies that we work with is the Southern Vermont Task Force, the DEA, the FBI, the U.S. Attorney's Office, the AG's office, and other agencies from the surrounding states. Overdoses to date is 105 with 7 fatalities. In 2018, we've had 101 overdoses with 8 fatalities. We still have a month and a week to go. So, unfortunately, we are going to surpass last year's overdoses, and it historically presents the same with fatalities. Sad to say. Seized to date, we have had 210 grams of crack cocaine, 625 bags of heroin, and 185 various pills. Once again, these are just Brattleboro. These are not joint operations, just us. That is the law enforcement side of the opiate crisis on what we have done. We've been out there doing a really, really good job on trying to make it as unattractive as possible to be in here. Now, with that being said, you can't arrest your way out of this, so you obviously have to have other solutions in that. So I'd like to talk a little bit about Project CARE. Mind you, whenever we go to an overdose, a Project CARE member gets notified, and with 24 to 48 hours, that individual does a follow-up with the person that OD'd. And that has, and we'll talk more about that, but I think that is just absolutely amazing, where someone knocks on the door and basically says, hey, how you doing? You need some help? These are the services that are available. And we work with Turning Point and Groundworks on that, and it is such a collaboration that it's really successful. It truly is. The numbers of the ODs and the fatalities may put a damper on the party, but I think if you look at what Project CARE is doing, what they have accomplished in a very short period of time, like within 2 years, really needs to be celebrated and acknowledged. The outreach team in the month of October contacted 30 individuals who are identified at high risk when they visit known areas with drug trafficking and high drug use. In 2019, 34 people were transported to various facilities for treatment. Of the 105 overdoses in 2019, 45 had direct contacts from the PD or Turning Point or Groundworks for follow-up. 21 were referred for intervention with Groundworks, and 39 we were unable to make contact or they denied any services. We also instituted a new protocol in 2019 that I thought was very important, is the transporting individuals who are in lockup to their MATE appointments, their medical assisted treatment. Where in the past, if someone was incarcerated, they were denied treatment. That makes no sense to me. So what we did is instituted a procedure where if you're incarcerated and you are currently undergoing medical assisted treatment, that while you're in our facility, we will take you to that facility so you could get your medicine, and then we would transport you back to lockup. So we continued throughout the weekends or whatever, their medical assistant. This has been very successful in keeping at-risk people engaged in treatment. To date, we have transported 9 people throughout this service. Things that we look at throughout the year, department-wise, are like our goals within training, and to what Tim was talking about earlier is this year, our main goal in training was in use of force was de-escalation, tactics and techniques. And for anyone that have saw that video the other day on Putney Road, I cannot give a greater example or more praise to my officers for the past 11 months on everything that we have trained to do. They actually did for everyone to see that things do not need to end tragically. And he got the time, the distance, he de-escalated it. They did a outstanding job. As a matter of fact, I was away, but as soon as it happened, I probably had 8 phones in my face saying, "Chief, look at this, what do you think, what do you think?" And the only thing I could say was they did a fantastic job. I couldn't even recognize the officers because the phones were so small and I'm blind. But just seeing their actions, I was like, that is exactly what we have been striving for the last 11 months is looking at all aspects of our use of force program and just trying to say, okay, we can implement de-escalation techniques in there, and that was a great example. For the upcoming year, our focus is going to be on officer wellness and procedural justice. The officer wellness aspect will be their physical fitness, their mental health, their stress. We're going to really take a good look at that to make sure all our officers are taking care of themselves. And then the leadership team with the command element and the supervisors are going in depth into procedural justice. And that way, officers are going to really experience a good, healthy, vibrant working environment where they are held accountable, they understand the standards, and they know where they stand. Another goal that we're looking at is hopefully you've been hearing about it or at least seeing it, is we have started a directive that there will be an officer downtown walking from 10 to 1800, 6 o'clock every day. And that has I think made a big difference, not just a little difference. I think that's made a big difference. I've been getting a lot of emails, phone calls with appreciation of that, just having the officers down there. The officers they like it. I mean, they're enjoying it. They're getting to meet a lot of the merchants. They're getting to meet a lot of the citizens basically just walking around. And hopefully the goal is not so much enforcement, but just to be present there and to be perfectly honest, to kind of like put a little cover on this perception of how unsafe downtown is. Downtown is not unsafe. It's not crime-free, but it's not unsafe. And that's what I would like the citizens to understand, that, you can be safe downtown. There's crime, there's no doubt about that. Of course there is. But being downtown is safe. So please support your local stores during this holiday season and walk around and enjoy the beautiful downtown. With that being said, I apologize for rambling. If you have any specific questions about the department, the budget, where I'm going, my philosophy, I'm more than happy to answer them the best I can.
Is that video gonna be part of your training for your de-escalation in the future?
Absolutely.
Because it really, I held my breath the whole time. And I was really pleased at the end. It was pretty intense. Okay, members of the board have questions or comments or?
I do.
Yeah.
I was really happy to hear about the increased presence downtown, and I wondered if you could just expand a little bit on how that includes the parking garage.
How does it include
The parking garage.
The parking garage?
Yeah.
It's not, the parking garage isn't singled out. It's, if we got complaints while someone was down there, then we would direct them towards the parking garage. But basically what they would do is they'll go down and walk, and wherever there's activity is where they're gonna hang out. So if there's activity in the co-op parking lot, then that's where you're probably gonna find them, with the Whetstone Bridge. Occasionally, they might walk over to the lower level of the transportation center, but if like the co-op is dead and the bridge is quiet and nobody's there, well then you'll see them going up and down. So there is no specific, you will walk this certain area, unless of course we get complaints that, hey, there's at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, there's a large group of people hanging out in Harmony Lot, and you know, people coming from CCV are concerned, or you know, employees walking to their cars. So then we would direct them there. But we usually do that triangle where you start off by the transportation center, go down Elliott, go down Flat, and then back around Co-op, and then back up around again. That's pretty much our triangle.
Thank
where
you.
we hang out.
Can I add on to that?
Of course.
Great, I will. So, yeah, you mentioned that the goal is, you know, to kind of reassure folks, to provide a police presence, and I'm sure there's relationship building as part of that as well. And so between the hours of 10 and 6, especially, you know, earlier in the year when it was light during all that time, I guess I'm kind of curious about why not later in the evening. You know, I believe that our downtown is a safe and joyous place to be, and I know that other people have different opinions, and I would like them to be reassured, and so I wonder whether there's, you know, any scope for expanding those patrolling hours, or whether like data, like
Right.
I would be quite interested to know whether data drives this, or whether this is about like, you know, a need to kind of reassure.
It's a need to reassure.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, it's a visibility issue, because we've got a lot of people that were saying they felt unsafe. So having an officer down there will hopefully would make them feel more safe. And I need to clarify, please, there are a lot of officers down there past 6. Don't
Right.
think that we totally abandoned downtown at 6. Oh, the chief's in bed, you know, we don't have to do this.
Yeah.
I should clarify,
6
from
o'clock.
10 to 6, it is mandatory there's an officer downtown. Absolutely mandatory, okay? Between 6 in the evening and 10 the following morning, supervisors still have the discretion and the obligation to put their people downtown and meet the needs of the town and the community. So yes, there will be people still down there later on in the evening, but from 10 until 6, someone will be down there. See, in the past, what happened is when we had directives down there, they would get calls and they would leave. So they would go to a non-priority call. So they would be downtown for 15 minutes and then go to a call. And then by the time they come back, it was too disorganized and too hectic. So now when you go down there, you're down there for 2 hours and you're not pulled unless it is something extremely serious. Other officers and supervisors will answer your calls for service, while you were down there, and then you're going to return that favor when the other officer goes down there for the 2 hours. So basically, it is a dedicated assignment from 10 until 6.
Great, thanks for the clarification.
Yes, sir.
Watch out tomorrow night. Tomorrow night, all these kids coming home celebrating the colonels. You never know what's going to happen.
David?
Yeah,
Thank you for that, Tim.
like you mentioned,
Sounds like Tim's going out.
I am caught. Yeah, you caught me.
you mentioned the focus on health. And I'm wondering if that's reflected in the budget. Are you looking for additional resources? And the reason I ask is the school district recently heard from administrators that because they're dealing with so much trauma with these kids, they become desensitized to it, and the teachers become desensitized to it, and they become traumatized. And I can't imagine that it's any different with adults and with the things that you people see. So I'm wondering if there's anything specific you've got in mind, or if you need any. If not, would you want to add something?
No, it is.
It's really crucial.
It is crucial.
It's crucial to keeping officers as well as keeping them effective.
Absolutely, yes, sir.
And it's different now than it was.
It is reflected in my budget in my training line. We did an increase. That's what we used that money for. So there is a slight increase in my training line. And that is also because hopefully we want to get full staff. But yes, that was taken into consideration when we did our training line budget.
Thanks.
I had a question about overtime. I'm looking at sort of actual for FY 2019, how much higher that was than the actual 2018. And I'm thinking that, and tell me if I'm wrong, kind of lines up with our 5 officers down time period. So you can really definitely see the volatile nature of that line reflecting not having, consistent employment. And I see it's going up, but, who knows what's going to be. Do you want to make any comment about overtime? Because in the past, I have sort of questioned relying on overtime versus really making the efforts, as you have very well, of getting the solid officers in there who are going to want to stick around. But what do you see going forward? Are you continuing your efforts to really staff up consistently and make sure you have those continually good officers coming in? And just any comment you might have about the use of overtime, whether it's going to be missed if we do have a full complement of officers, because people can tend to get used to it.
They do.
Yeah.
It's funny you mention that because already the shift overtime is shrinking. And that, as a police chief, I love that for more than one reason, because now the focus on overtime goes to like Governor Highway Safety, where they will want to go out and do motor vehicle enforcement, or they'll want to spend time downtown walking, where they don't want to do that when 4 or 5 days in a row they're doing 16 on, 8 off, 16 on, 8 off. All those proactive law enforcement activities definitely go to the wayside. Nobody wants to, and when you get your days off, they're not going to be like, yeah, let me come in and do another 10 hours overtime when I already have 30 for the pay period. So as we get fully staffed, the shift overtime shrinks, and it makes them look for other avenues, because you're absolutely right. They're very accustomed to those nice paychecks. And now they'll have to do Governor Highway Safety, the JAG grant, things of that nature. But also with overtime, with law enforcement, it's kind of a double-edged sword, where the more proactive you are, the more arrests you get, the more depositions you attend, the more courts you go to. That's all overtime. So, it's one of those where if you got a really proactive police department, you're going to have a robust overtime, because you're going to have to pay for that. But the shift overtime is what I look at, because that deals with the overall wellness of the officers. They're not constantly, I mean, literally, last year, they were doing 16,
Yeah.
going home for 8 hours, coming in for 16, and coming in for, you know, and it was, you could see it. You could absolutely see it. And that's just not a good place where you want to be. So we're getting rather robust, we're getting healthy. They're looking for other avenues of proactive policing, other areas of funding to get their overtime, and that's a win-win for everybody within the community, you know.
Thank you.
Yes, you have more questions?
Yeah, I have a few more questions. Project Care. So I know there's not a Project Care line. Could you say more about why that is?
Because I don't know if that should be a police function, to be honest with you. We headed it out of necessity. Someone had to take lead, and we did. I have a lot of different views on that. Should that come under Human Services? Or should it be a police department line item? I think we should fund it, but I don't necessarily know if the police department would be the way to fund it. Under Human Services, maybe Turning Point, maybe Groundworks, might be able to ask for that money. I know I have spoken with the director at Turning Point and Lieutenant Petlock, who oversees the program for the department, and there is definitely a need for funding, because right now everything's volunteer basis, everything. And I know the $2,000 grant that United Way gave them for transportation is almost all but done. So it needs to be funded. It needs to be, the recovery coaches need to be paid for their time to go out there because of the hard work that they do, the invaluable work that they do. Right now, they're just doing it because they care, and they care about the community. So I'd be more than willing to sit down and discuss with the other individuals on how it should properly be funded, and if it's determined that the police department is the way we want to go, I'd be more than happy to put a line item in there and submit the funding for it.
It might not be a bad way
Let me
to
ask
go.
a follow-up.
Have a conversation
Okay.
with Susie and, do you guys agree?
I didn't hear that.
I think, the chief said that he'd be willing to sit down with the other, people involved with Project Care and see where people think funding, who should be asking for the money.
Yeah, because those human service requests are happening now.
Yeah, so-
They're budgeting for asking for money at town meeting under human services, just as you're budgeting now. So now would be the time.
But the individual agencies, the deadline for individual agencies to apply actually has come and gone. The committee is doing its review now.
Oh.
But that wouldn't stop the select board from making a recommendation as part of your budget that you send to town meeting, including a Project Care line.
And I think aside from that, the chief's suggestion of actually thinking a little bit about where the funding should sit, if we did decide that we needed to do it.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
It might not necessarily be a home for inside the police department's budget.
No, but
So,
But I'd like the
Chief could give
stakeholders.
us an idea of
yeah.
the amount
Yeah.
that would be necessary to spread among all of the agencies.
I got a ballpark from Lieutenant Petlock,
Awesome.
which would be, at $12 an hour, 15 hours a week, for recovery coaches. That would be $9,360 a year. And then, transportation would be another additional $3,800 a year, getting people to the facilities and back. So you're probably looking at if I rounded numbers up real quick, probably around $13,000-14,000 is what they initially requested on recovery coaches and transportation costs to the facilities.
Who would the recovery coaches be?
They would come at a turning point.
I see.
They go through training, and they have to be people who are actually in recovery.
Oh,
Yeah.
So like,
I was thinking counselors or people.
Oh, no, these are
no,
people.
these are people
Yeah.
in long-term
This is
recovery.
Yep.
And they are invaluable, how they relate to individuals and basically how they educate us.
Yep.
And what about the groundworks? Is there volunteers that need to be paid?
So they have a field
That
staff.
I don't know.
Groundworks doesn't have any volunteers
No.
that work outside of the food shelf. Anybody that is working, that doesn't mean that more money wouldn't be helpful. It's too bad that Rihanna left, but you can always include Rihanna in those conversations. But when groundwork staff join in, they're pulling a paid staff member off their normal duties and putting them on the street.
Same with the police
And the
department's
same.
contribution.
Right.
So there's substantial contributions being made there that show up in salaries rather than in a line item.
Right.
I think Turning Point just naturally for a while was more of a volunteer model, although I think some of that is beginning to shift.
Yeah. If we were to fund this, I would like a salary that was above $12 an hour for
I was
this
gonna-
recovery
I figured
I
you were
just
gonna
raised
say
my hand to
15,
say
yeah.
the same
Just
thing,
wanted-
yeah. If we're gonna ask Peter to
Yeah.
develop the proposal, I'd like it to be 15.
Yeah.
15, yeah.
15?
It's a lot of work for an hour.
Well, and it's not quite a living wage if you're doing it full-time, so,
Yeah.
you know, it's sort of helpful.
Are there other questions on the police budget for the chief?
Yeah, I have a sort of related question. If I remember correctly, there was a social worker kind of liaison involved with the staff, but not part of the staff.
Correct.
Is that still the case?
Yes, it is. She's comes from us from HCRS.
Okay.
So technically, she's an employee of HCRS, but she comes right to us every morning and stays with us Monday through Friday.
And works full-time hours with
Oh, yes.
the department? Okay.
Through
But HDRS
at your
pays for that.
At our
Right.
building.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, thanks HDRS.
She's like embedded.
Yeah, and that's a policy the state adopted a long time ago, to contract for those things rather than have state employees providing those services.
Okay.
Further questions?
I don't think so, it's burned down the
Thank you,
house.
chief.
No, thank you.
You're welcome.
I want to check with our interpreters to see if usually we've been breaking to give them a break around 8 o'clock. Well, we've got the fire department budget left, and that's what we have, and I'm not sure.
Any estimate?
Yeah, I mean, we can just take it 5 minutes if you want.
45 minutes.
Is that all right with everybody if we just break for 5 minutes, let them stretch hands and stuff, and we'll come back at 8:20. And we are back. Thanks for entertaining that opportunity for a break. And we are moving now on to our final item of the evening, which is the FY21 proposed budget for the fire department. And we have Chief Sapasi and Len Howard with us.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Just a quick overview. What we plan to do is a lot in the lines of what Chief Fitzgerald did. You'll hear a lot of the same stuff because the departments mirror each other a lot, working on the same stuff. So some of that will be a little bit redundant. But so BFD consists of paid staff of 25 people. This number, when it's broken out, is 21 shift personnel. They work 56 hours a week. Their work schedule is 24 hours on, and then they have 48 hours off, so the 3 shifts rotate every third day they're working. Then there's the office manager, the fire alarm superintendent, myself, and Assistant Chief Howard. We make up the staff of 25. We have a call staff, which is comparable to a very low-paid volunteer staff of only 8. That crew has been very hard to keep the numbers up like everywhere else in the world today, volunteers are hard to come by, and the ones we do have are a very dedicated group, and they work right alongside the paid staff at emergencies, and we really value their participation. So with it, as I explained, the 21 folks that are on shift, they make up the 3 shifts. We work out of 2 stations. The 7 that are on duty, 5 of them are downtown and 2 of them run out of the West Brattleboro station. Minimum manning is 4 at Central and always 2 at Station 2. We never go below 2 in West Brattleboro. We average approximately 2,400 calls a year. That's been consistently increasing over the last few years. Our high a couple of years ago, for an all-time high, was 2,442 calls. And more now we're seeing double and triple calls. So the way the shifts are broken up is we'll run 3 vehicles, and there's 2. When we're running 6 folks, there's 2 vehicles on, or 2 people on each vehicle. So it's very common now to have 2 and 3 vehicles running different calls. It really stretches us thin at times.
So far this year, 30% of the time we're doing multiple calls.
Something that kind of piggybacks onto our budget and our funding is grants. The fire service has seen a really a big decrease in grant funding and availability. We used to do really good with the Homeland Security sub-grants from the state of Vermont. It was federal money that came down to the states and then was allocated out to the towns. That money not only has the amount decreased, but the restrictions on that money have really tightened up. So it's harder to get that money for different things that we were using it for. Right now we're looking at a grant through an energy company. It's TC Energy. They look at communities basically for safety grants. I'd like to do some training if we could get that grant, which should be coming in front of you here probably after the holidays. Once things slow down a little bit, we get through the budgets. We do very well with the VLCT passive grant. Every year, that's 50% funding, and that's for a lot of safety equipment and training money. The big one that is very competitive, and it's the only national grant, if you will, and it's the FEMA Assistance to Firefighters Grant. Though we had luck with it, 15, 17 years ago, roughly, when we replaced our radio system. The town of Brattleboro is of a size and in a financial situation where, because there's so much competition for this grant, that we actually don't score well, if that makes sense. Believe it or not, I would almost say we're too well off to score well in this grant. Peter's familiar with it, and we've talked about it, and it's really a rough one to work with. So unless we really have something, we put in for it a couple of years ago to help fund the ladder truck, and we didn't even get through the peer process.
I remember that.
It's very difficult grant for a town of this size and of our means. Out in the community, a lot of the same stuff. As the police chief talked about, we do a lot of fire prevention work and safety education. We spend a lot of time, believe it or not, in the factories doing extinguisher work, evacuation plans. The nursing homes, we do a lot of work with them on extinguisher training, safety plans, and evacuation stuff. how to move patients safely. If, we have to move patients. We do a lot of CPR and AED training out in the community, and stop the bleed training. And right now we're working with all of the elementary schools to stop the bleed, and we've actually got a CPR AED training set up with one of the schools. They've gone out and bought an AED, and we're going to do the training with them. The shifts have what we call adopted schools. So each shift is, like Platoon 1 does Green Street School, and they do regular visits to the schools. Again, it's enthusiastically received by the staff. They'll go do recess with them, play kickball, wiffle ball, basketball, sit and have lunch with the kids, breakfast. They just mix it up, and each shift are required to go into the schools monthly to do that. And we just believe that not only is it good for the kids, but it's good for our guys to get out and see what's going on. But with the world the way it is today, we want the children to not be afraid of the uniforms. So if something happens, we want them running to us and not hiding from us. So that's one of the main reasons we're doing that. And the fire department has the lead in the school crisis response plan. We do monthly meetings on that with all of the school administrators, and the private schools are all involved in that. And a lot of work has gone into that, and it's just a constant work in progress. And not only are we proud of the plan, but God forbid if anything ever happens in our schools, I think we're pretty well prepared. One of the things when we started this is we wanted to do this because we don't want to stand in the road and look at each other and say, okay, now what do we do? And I think that we're well past that and very well prepared to handle an emergency in the schools. Training, there's been some big training opportunities that our folks have gone through. Two of them actually they're just finishing up. One of them's called Rapid Intervention Teams, and basically it's rescue, self-rescue, and rescuing of firefighters by firefighters. How to get out of entanglements, how to do bailouts out of a window, things like that to rescue yourself. We've had 4 go through the state certified inspections program to do the life safety inspections, to give AC Howard a hand. And as we get into this, we're glad that we're growing this number, and we'll tell you why. We just had one individual on his own, with his own money, become a certified paramedic in the state of Vermont, which is a huge accomplishment, especially on his own. And the only thing that it cost the town was I was flexible with his work hours so he could attend his clinical time at the hospital and to get the hands-on that the class required. Everything else he paid for. We're trying to line up a management class for our supervisors. We just went through very good training with the Women's Freedom Center, which was not only eye-opening, but it was a lot of fun. And I think the folks got a lot out of it, the staff. And like the police department, we're spending a lot of time on firefighter wellness, and especially on the mental side of it, I guess. We're working with Uniformed Services, the retreat. I'm trying to do an MOU with the retreat for what we call defusing tactics. So if we have a major critical incident and we need to bring somebody in and defuse a group of our folks, that I'm trying to work on an MOU with them to do that. And we're also working with a private wellness coach that does not only the mindful stuff, but we're actually doing some relaxation exercises, and we'll be starting that after the first of the year. I want AC Howard to talk a little bit about where we are with the rental housing inspection program, because that's really got off to a good start.
Yes, we're just about in our second month of the rental housing program. We have 216 buildings registered so far. We're in Zone 1 this year, and we've inspected 56 buildings and 200, which includes 254 units. In 2 months, we're 33% of the way through Zone 1. So we're doing very good progress. We currently have 5 guys on staff that are trained to do this. And so far, I've heard nothing but positive feedback from the landlords and the tenants in the buildings. I'm very happy with the progress that we've done so far, and I think we're going to see a big improvement in the housing in town.
So that was one of the reasons that we wanted to get more inspectors on board, to keep up the pace, to get into some of these buildings that we haven't been in many years, and hopefully avoid situations like we saw earlier tonight. We're glad that our folks are showing that interest to do this. The budget. The budget really just includes some minor adjustments that have been made outside of the personnel costs. The personnel costs that you do see in the budget are all made by the town manager's office through the contractual agreements. The changes that we've proposed as the management and approved by the town manager including the personnel costs that have been made, represent approximately a $59,470 increase, or 3%. The line items that, for the lack of a better description that I can say, we can control, everything that's outside of the personnel cost, but including, the only personnel it really includes is the auxiliary staff. That total number is down by $6,250. And just some of the highlights in that, the auxiliary staff, we've reduced that by $2,000. We continue, like I said, to have problems staffing that group, and over the last couple, 3 years, we've kind of held on to the money, hoping that things would turn around, but they haven't. So what I did was we took that money and actually we didn't eliminate it, but we took $2,000 and, as you'll see, we put it into other line items where we felt we needed more money. So we took $1,000 of it and put it in. We can go over that in a minute. Propane, we reduced that by $8,750. That is our biggest decrease, and that's based on the history. We're starting to get a better handle on the usage in the new buildings, and though I think it'll be tight, I think we can do it at that number. And my office manager goes out and gets a bulk price, and she beats him up hard, and we get a good price. We get a very good price on propane. Office supplies we've reduced by $500. So the equipment line item we increased by $1,000, and that $1,000 was half of the $2,000 that we took from the auxiliary staff. Training we increased by $1,000, and that was the other $1,000 that we took from the auxiliary staff. We wanted some more money in training, not only to keep our folks safe, but to keep up with changes, modern technology. And one of the bigger things we're seeing is the fire academy is basically self-funded, and they're funded through grants, and from the Division of Fire Safety. So they don't have a budget of their own, and they're even having a hard time getting grants now. So some of their training programs that we have always got for free in the field are now being cut. So we're going to see an increase in what we have to pay for,
This
I
is
think, in
the
the coming
state?
years.
Yes.
So weird.
Building repairs, we've increased by $1,000. The warranty periods, even though the buildings are new, the warranty periods on the equipment are now all starting to go away and expire. And so that's costs that we're going to have to start picking up. You know, with the expansion, we've got more maintenance to do. Like we've got 4 more overhead doors that require annual maintenance, things like that. And it adds up. So we put in another $1,000 there. Telephone, we increased by $750, and the reason for that is to keep up with technology. We're trying to put tablets in all of the trucks. We've got them in 3 right now, and it's really working out well. It's something we've slowly gone into, and it's really helped the officers a lot in the field, as well as we want the inspectors to start doing some of that work out in the field. They can actually do a check sheet as they're doing their inspection instead of coming back to the station and filling out the paperwork. Operating supplies, we've increased by $250, and that's basically to get it into a closer to the historical spending that we've had. And clothing, we've increased by $1,000, and that's to maintain our bunker gear replacement, which averages about a 3% increase every year. That's the budget, and we're glad to answer any questions you may have.
I'd like to offer my thanks to the department. When you said that you were going out on triple calls, I feel like that matches what I hear. Like, sometimes I feel like, and I don't know if it's because of the work that I was doing, that I'm always hearing sirens, I'm always hearing you guys go out, and so you saying that kind of validates that what I'm hearing is true, and every time that you've ever come to anywhere where I am, it's always been kind and good communication, and I really appreciate that.
Thank you. I appreciate that. The staff has had a difficult go at it at some of them. You know, the health orders we did the other day, it wasn't easy, and we didn't like doing that, but and that just plays into the social things that are going on in town, and makes it difficult at times. But the staff has really adapted to it, and they've done well.
I appreciate that, and we're behind all actions like that, 100%. We have the back. This rental program obviously was so needed, and yeah, I think we know I could go into that deeply, but I won't right now. Ms. Bliss?
So, does the department have a wellness program similar to the police? For the firefighters?
Right. An organized one, not yet. And that's what we're getting off the ground in January, with a private contract with a local lady that's going to help us with that. Still, uniform services, I can't say enough about those folks. They came in and did some special training with us on relaxation techniques and things like that. But they're a phone call away just to help us
And
when they
who
don't
are
have
they?
to. They're a program through the retreat, and they specialize in PTSD of uniformed people, military and first responders. and they're fantastic. And like I said, we used them yesterday. They're a phone call away to give us advice to get somebody headed in the right direction before they even need to go into their program. And I'm working with the Director of Ambulatory Services to get that MOU written. So we have basically counselors on call for us.
Oh, great.
And they have been, uniformed services, even though they're associated with the retreat, aren't really, the way I understand it, part of the retreat. They're a separate program, but the retreat also has been fantastic and they're trying to find funding so we don't have to pay for this on-call team. And that's kind of what's holding it up. So it's a big topic in today's first responder world.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Couple. Should I go?
Yeah.
The rental housing, it's listed as overtime, but that's the funding, that's the expense for the rental housing.
For the guys.
Which is overtime.
Yeah.
Yeah. I noticed that it's up a tick for $1,000, but that's probably just a marker that it's probably gonna go up a little. You said 33% you're through on the first
On zone
round,
one,
first
yes.
zone. So what's your sense of what it might take? I mean, just a little
I
bit
think,
above what we financed?
Currently talking with Cindy and going over the budget figures so far, we're actually a little less than what we thought we would be, so I think we're in pretty good shape as far as with that number.
Okay, yeah, so you've kind of nailed it.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, I think it's an essential program, as you know.
Mhm.
Stated my views on that. I'll pass it over to whoever else.
Yeah, I had a rental housing inspection program question as well. So you said that 216 buildings had registered thus far. What is that as a percentage?
We have 956 buildings with 3,000 something units.
Okay.
So we've sent out letters a couple of times to all the people, and I keep sending, there's a landlord association, and I keep reaching out to the president of that association saying, please remind your folks that this is an ordinance now and they need to register the buildings. There's a little confusion there. People are thinking that if they register, their building's gonna get inspected this year, and we're trying to explain to them that's not the case. You need to register your building every year. We come and inspect the zone every 4 years.
Right.
So it's an education thing, which I'll continue to keep pushing and getting people notified and saying, you need to do this. And after the first year, I think we'll be in good shape.
Okay, great. I have a more prosaic question. It's about the electric line item. I noticed there's a 25% increase on that, which is $5,400. And I'm just looking at the history, and I'm presuming that it's just really, it was like under budgeted for last year, and this is more of an accurate reflection.
We didn't, yeah, and I think part of it is we didn't really know how to budget for the
new buildings.
The new
Right,
buildings. And a lot of that stuff we're starting to get a handle on now.
I mean, at Central, we basically doubled our square footage, so.
Okay. Yeah. Cool. Does the fire department get the solar credits as well? Like, are they
Yes.
part of that? Yeah. Okay.
So there really are a combination of things going on there. They're absolutely right. The buildings in one case is, almost doubled in size. But that's counterbalanced by the accounts participating in the solar credits. So there's a little bit of, trying to walk the line as it genuinely is going to be. And so we're doing the best that we can there.
Yeah, thanks.
Further questions or comments from the board?
I want to know why the chief gets this amazing picture in December on the calendar, but I don't see you, Len. Are you in here?
Just on the front.
You missed picture day.
Yeah.
Just in the big.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
When he was inspecting
That's
rental
right.
properties on the day the photos went in.
Just
This is available.
Photoshop his head
Still-
on in there.
Are some still available? They're available,
This is a revenue line item right here.
You're gonna
right?
have a new one?
Yeah, I
for
Tim
the
is,
new
for
year?
those who can't see, holding up the Brattleboro Fire Department 2020 calendar.
I got a big rust.
And this isn't just to give the VFW auxiliary credit. They're the ones that are behind it and wanted to do it. And
Thank you.
thank them very
And
much.
where can we get ours?
They got my $10 or?
The judge and the
No, we
vice
get, we get your.
Hired to put
Hold it up higher.
Oh, sorry.
Look in the thing.
Look,
Now
look,
lower,
sorry.
now higher.
There you go.
You're good.
Very good.
That's good.
That was
Now
fun.
don't move.
A little to the left.
Where do you get them?
Great.
We have them at Central Station.
You can get
Central
them.
Station, $10 supports BFD.
Christmas is coming.
Yep, pop into Central Station to get your calendar.
Brandy, if I could, one final quick thing
Yes.
is, and another little project that we do have going, is back when Vermont Yankee was operating, they always did the annual calendar with the special needs
Oh, yeah.
cards that were in them that, so if people needed extra help in an evacuation or whatever, they would fill out the cards, send them in, and it would go into a database.
Oh, yeah.
That hasn't been done in quite a few years, 3 or 4 or 5 now. The fire department just did a campaign on that. We want to get it going again. We want to build that database back up and update it.
Right.
It's been in the media and things. So if you know of anybody that needs help to the public, go on our website and there's a fillable form there. And it's held in confidentiality, goes in our database. So if, we have an emergency on Cedar Street. We bring up Cedar Street, we can see where folks may need some extra help. And that's where some of the extra attention will be paid in an emergency.
That seems incredibly valuable.
So if, the return on right now is very slow, so if we can get the word out, to get those forms, and it's a big help to us. And major power outages, bigger storms, we'll check on folks.
Yeah, maybe you have somebody make a social media post and we can all
We'll share it out for sure.
share it out.
Good.
So
Thank
just
you.
to make sure people heard that at home, if you live in Brattleboro and you have a special need and you go to the fire department's website, there is a fillable form where you can put down your name and where you live, and it's confidential, but it will flag an alert, so to speak, to the fire department so that you can get the help that you need in an emergency.
The
That's
town clerk also does a large social media
Really
distribution of anything that comes through, so.
so we can get the word out for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much for everything you do in our community.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.
You too.
Right.
Okay, we have no other items on our agenda, so at this time, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, meeting's adjourned at 8:50.
Thanks, BCTV.
I did not do it myself this time.